He's retired from the NYPD, the New York Police Department. He spent much of his career in the famed ESU unit, Emergency Services Unit. He was shot twice in the line of duty. He's here to tell us about that and much more. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Get access to free podcast versions of the show and more on Facebook. Do a search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. And if you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y. You can also search for at LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, W-I-L-E-Y, at LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Connecting with us from upstate New York, we have Al Baker on the phone. Al is a retired NYPD lieutenant. He spent much of his career working in the famed NYPD's ESU Emergency Services Unit. Al, first of all, thanks for being a guest on the show. Secondly, and most importantly, thanks for your service. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that honor.
We're thrilled to have you here. We're going to talk about a couple things. Actually, two things. You were shot twice in the line of duty, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And then when you were overseeing the ESU, you wound up in a situation where you had to shoot some polar bears, and we will talk about that as well. Yes, polar bears in New York City. I know it sounds strange, and I'm sure you took a lot of heat for that. Al, How long ago did you retire?
Well, I retired from the NYPD in 1990 after 25 years, but then I worked as a law enforcement shield instructor nationally and internationally for 10 years, and then I worked for 3 years as a training manager for ATF, and then in 2005 I invented a shield and went into the shield business. So
when we talk about shields, we didn't have those things when I was policing. What is the shield you're talking about?
So the common term for the shield is bunker. It's a piece of armor that's typically square or concave that has handles on it, and it typically has a viewport, and it's used for high-risk entries or hostage barricade situations, and it stops bullets. You can see through the viewport, and it's typically in the 20-inch wide by 36-inch high dimension, and it's very common in SWAT work and in, like I said, high-risk entries.
Well, we didn't have that, and there's many things. I started policing in 1980. I retired. I got hurt and retired young at the age of 33 in 1992, so our careers overlapped. You started before I did. I'm an old revolver cop, and we began transitioning after retired into semi-automatics. A lot of things, a lot of the tech nowadays we didn't have back then, but I believe a lot of policing is still the same. Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's policing is eternal, perennial, ongoing, and the basic protection of life and property is the simple mission of police work that's been that way forever.
Yeah, and I was trained by old-timers. I was trained by a lot of Vietnam veterans, combat veterans. We had a couple of Korean War veterans or command staff, and they had a different approach to policing. But the number one thing is the term we hear all the time now. We hear two terms: de-escalation, which was every day. We always try to do that. And the other was community policing, which was everyday policing. I didn't know it became a thing until a few years ago.
Right. Well, community policing, as you said, I mean, it goes all the way back to the beat cop back in the 1800s. We didn't call it community policing, but it was. And in today's day and age, it's just a matter of putting a more contemporary term on something that we always did.
Right. And I'm sure you were trained in the basics too. The number one thing, and before you get a story, I got to say this: we were trained from day one. You treat everybody respect, especially in their own home. Until they change the tone of the conversation, there's absolutely no backing down then.
Right. Well, the old-timers in the NYPD, they used to use a phrase that it took you years to figure out what they really meant. The phrase was, do the right thing. And you said, when you were a rookie cop and you didn't have the experience, you said, what does that mean? Right? What does do the right thing mean? And years later, you realized that do the right thing meant everything that you did should be right. And sometimes we talk about the old timers and the old school and all that stuff, and perhaps many of those old school veterans didn't always conform to the letter of the law, let's say, but yet there was a barometer of correctness and fairness that was implicit in that term, do the right thing. And that's the way I was brought up.
That's exactly the same here. And we use different terminology, but it's the same thing. And we could talk for hours about that alone. I want to get into one of my biggest complaints with the news media, and believe me, I have many of them. And partly it's our own faults because most police departments do not allow their police to talk to the news media at all.
Right.
And before is always wrong. They always got it wrong. But when an officer was shot, they always say the good news is the injuries are not life-threatening. And they never talk about what the officers went through. Nowadays, it's so misleading and so biased, it's not even close to the truth.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I remember coming home because obviously being a lieutenant in emergency service and spending my career in that unit, I was always involved in the most sensational situations, and they invariably were in the newspaper. So I'd come home the next day and put the newspaper on the kitchen table, and the kids would come around and read the story with me, and they'd say, "Well, what happened?" And I'd tell them what happened. They'd say, "Well, it doesn't say that. It says this." I'd say, "Yeah, they didn't get it right."
Yeah.
And that was always the way. And I don't know how you explain that. I guess the reporters do the best they can. They do what they think is right, but they don't always get it right. And, we don't always tell them the whole story. They don't always ask for the whole story. Right. And we don't always tell them the whole story.
Well, in a way, we have a lot of responsibility because our stories aren't being told. And the reason they're not being told is because we don't tell them. And if people don't know, well, we have no one to blame ourselves because what they're getting from the news media. And I'll give you an example. There's different newspapers in New York City, but we use Baltimore as an example. They always had the philosophy, if it bleeds, it leads. You look at the newspaper nowadays, in the news, it always leads with what the cop did last. It doesn't talk about, for example, cop shoots man. They don't talk about the 50 things the guy did before that could have changed the outcome. They show the final moment of what, and they leave out everything that led up to that necessary use of force, as we say. Yeah, and it's all the details are buried. Well, they know that we've become a society that's driven by headlines and small sound bites. And look, the 24-hour news cable channels, they're as guilty of this as anybody else. And they all cater to getting as many eyes and ears on their product as possible. We're talking with Al Baker. Al is retired NYPD lieutenant, spent much of his career in the ESU unit, which we'll talk about in a few moments. He was shot twice in line of duty and was on scene when a couple of polar bears had to be shot and killed. He'll tell us a story. Heading your way on Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. What is the Haunting or Not podcast? It's a free podcast that takes a different approach to ghost stories, hauntings, and cases of demonic forces. Husband and wife podcast hosts mix comedy, facts, and a healthy dose of police evidence skepticism to help you decide, are these hauntings or not? Helping you decide what's real and what is fake or an overhyped exaggeration. From world-famous cases to lesser-known reports, they talk about them all in the Haunting or Not podcast, available for free on most podcast platforms. Or do a Google search for Haunting or Not podcast.
I am Meg Marie O'Rourke from Harmony with Food. Do you ever wonder what foods you should or should not be consuming based on your own unique needs? At Harmony with Food, we are now able to determine exactly what foods we should or should not be consuming through advanced testing. Test, don't guess is the motto at Harmony with Food's BioUnique Boutique program. It has never been easier than now to determine what food, drinks, and supplements you need for your individualized needs. Head over to harmonywithfood.com and click on the testing tab.
Return to our conversation with Al Baker, retired lieutenant from the NYPD, spent much of his career in the famed ESU, Emergency Services Unit. And he was shot twice in the line of duty and also on scene when a couple polar bears had to be shot and killed in New York City. Al, first of all, what is ESU? There's an old saying I remember that when police need help, they call ESU in New York. Am I correct?
Well, the actual saying goes something like this. When a citizen needs help, they call the cops. When the cops need help, they call ESU. So essentially, ESU are the cops in New York City. It's a 35,000-member police department. It's a 400-member ESU. And we do everything from cutting rings off swollen fingers to rescuing people from the Brooklyn Bridge, from the top of the Brooklyn Bridge, bomb scares. We assist the bomb squad team. We do searches. We do water rescues. We do hazmat. We do vehicle extrications. We do every form of rescue, medical rescues. Everybody's a state-certified EMT. Everybody's a state-certified diver. We do special weapons, hostage barricade situations, and all form of warrant executions and high-risk entries. That pretty much sums up the...
I think that covers a lot of territory, to be honest with you.
It's an everything job. That's what makes it such an amazing job because, it's a very select unit. There's a lot of training. The school today is 8 months long for new ESU officers. It's a highly screened, selective process to get in. And, it's the fact that you're working with some of the best cops that you've ever worked with in your life, it makes it so wonderful and so great.
If you are in still communication with anybody in the department, please tell them I said thank you for all they do. And especially the ESU people.
I happen to be the president of the Retired Emergency Service Association. So
look, I know somebody then. I got a connection up there. If I get in any kind of jackpot in New York, I'm gonna drop a dime. I'm calling you.
You tell them you know Al Baker. They'll run the other way, but that's all right.
That's good. Al, you had the extreme misfortune of being shot twice in the line of duty. Was this before ESU or was it a combination?
No, it was during ESU, and I lost count of the number of shootings that I was directly or indirectly involved with in 25 years. But as a lieutenant commander, I had a van with a robot and a big rifle shield, and I went on almost every hostage barricade job in the city over my tenure. So I was involved in many shootings, but the first time that I actually got gunfire was on Clinton Street in New York City, when an individual had been holding his two children hostage on the 11th floor of a high-rise. And we attempted to negotiate with him. We brought in a Mandarin-speaking hostage negotiator. We went on and on for hours, and we put up we took down the door to the apartment, and we put our shields up in front of the door, but there was a crack in the shields because we couldn't overlap them, and we couldn't get complete coverage. And he fired a 12-gauge shotgun through the crack, which ricocheted and hit, and I got ricochet pellets in the face. Nothing life-threatening, just some wounds, some facial wounds. So, and then eventually he shot and killed both of his children during the negotiations. So we basically failed, and he had the door barricaded. We couldn't get in if we wanted to. It was concrete walls, and then there was an exchange of gunfire a final exchange of gunfire between he and one of my officers standing next to me, and he was shot and killed.
First of all, you said something very profound. You said we failed. Look, I get that. I know what that means. I know how you feel, but you also realize, and I'm sure you're in agreement, you're not God. You know, you're not Superman. Right. You can only do, and no matter what the news media says, you can only do what you can do.
Right. And I appreciate that. That means a lot. But, you know, and you as a cop and any other cop that listens knows that of all the life and death that we see in our careers, the one thing that really, really brings home to our emotions and our feelings are children.
Yep.
And these two kids, innocent children, and basically murdered in our presence while we were there. And, you know, I say failed because, you know, we came there to say, I mean, obviously I shouldn't be laughing, but it's almost funny in the sense that everybody we came to save is dead.
Right.
So
no, I get it. Look, and you and I, when I say you and I, police in general, we laughed about things because otherwise we'd cry.
Exactly. But kids, the point of my follow-up was that when it comes to kids, you know, that's something that hurts because, you know, most of us have kids and most of us feel the pain of innocence of a child.
The other thing for me that I'll be honest with you, Al, I still struggle with, I've not found a way to conveniently put this into the right cabinet in my brain. When children are harmed, killed, molested, maimed, especially by parents, by those who love them, I cannot come to grips with how can someone who supposedly loves someone do this to their children. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, very, very hard to get the mind around that, and that's one of the reasons why we just felt so terrible, because and those kids they were so obedient. There was not a sound came out of them. You know, they were doing everything that he told them. We had a camera from the floor above on a pole going into the window, looking at him and seeing. We didn't see the little boy, but we saw the little girl going back and forth in the camera view. So it was a tough ending, you know.
Yeah, and I'm sure the guy was, the term that people love nowadays is emotionally disturbed. Look, I'll say this. You can have mental issues all day long. I have lots of compassion and empathy, but the moment you threaten someone else's life, it's a different story.
Oh yeah, and you know, I mean, the emotionally disturbed moniker is kind of overworked. You know, I mean, everybody's emotionally disturbed from one point to another. You know, we call them EDPs, emotionally disturbed person, but we have a little slang for that in NYPD. We call them everyday people. You know. So it's kind of true because who among us doesn't get emotionally ramped up every now and then? You know, it's part of life. It's part of the human condition.
One of the things that just about everybody I've had that's worked in law enforcement for any period of time on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, they all say the same thing. To some degree or another, I'm a little bit dinged up. I'm a little bit messed up. And I'm okay with that. It comes with the territory with this job.
Well, you know, I used to tell my cops, you know, if you're in doubt about what you're doing, you know, take out your badge and read it. If it says something about police work, you know, that should be a clue, because, you know, you came into a job that you're going to have a front row seat to life and death for every day that you're on that job. It's going to be the most difficult thing, or sometimes the best and sometimes the worst. You know, police work can be described as endless hours of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer
Absolutely. We're talking with Al Baker, retired NYPD lieutenant, much of his career in ESU. When we return, we'll talk about the second time he was shot. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. If you want to be a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, simply contact us. It couldn't be easier. You can send us a message on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show page, or email jay@letradio.com. That's JAY@letradio.com. And if you're on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app, be sure to look for me and follow me. My name's John, the letter J, Wiley, Wiley. You can also search for @LET Radio Show. That's John J. Wiley, Wiley, @LET Radio Show on the Clubhouse drop-in audio chat app. Return to our conversation with Al Baker on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Al is retired lieutenant from the NYPD, spent much of his career in ESU, and that's the Emergency Services Unit. By the way, fascinating job that they do. But everybody in that unit started off as street cops, didn't they?
Yes, and in fact, you'd have to have 5 years experience with a good record, good productivity in a high experience area of the city with a good record, and then you'd have to bring some skills to the table. You'd have to have maybe some medical skills, some military skills, maybe some rigging or some trade skills, carpentry, electrician, because all the different calls that we get cover every type of mechanical situation imaginable. So they have to come with skill sets first, and then they go through a rather extensive screening process. There's high-angle testing, confined space testing, there's mechanical aptitude testing, there's psychological testing, there's interviews, there's weapon screening. So there's a whole battery of screening before one even becomes a candidate.
And by the way, I didn't say this earlier, and I should have. Al has still got his thumb on the pulse of what's happening in policing. Check out his website, bakerballistics.com. That's BAKER ballistics.com. During your career in the ESU, in the NYPD, you talked about earlier, and we'll get into the details of recovery in a moment, when you were shot on scene with ricochet rounds from a shotgun. There was another shooting where you're injured as well.
Yes. So in this particular instance, this was out in Brooklyn, and it was out in the Cropsey area of Brooklyn, the 6-2 precinct to be exact. And this individual was an ex-con, and a middle-aged guy, ex-con, did his time, lived on the second floor of a 2-story frame neighborhood house across the street from a public school, and he had a bunch of weapons in his house. He had rifles and pistols. So the way the story went, before we got there, I was told that somebody was trying to steal his car, which is an everyday occurrence in Brooklyn, of course. And he went to the window and started firing shots. And, of course, that drew the patrol officers. They came, and for some reason, he wasn't wrapped all that too tight, and he starts shooting at the cops. I don't know whether he thought the cops were after him for shooting or whatever the case may be. Anyway, they evacuate the area, call for emergency service. So we respond, and of course, I have my van, as I described. I have a ballistic shield, I have ballistic blankets, I have a robot, I have all this special equipment that we use for hostage barricade perimeters. So when I get there, they said, well, he's confined to his bedroom, and it's at the top of the stairs, and you can go up the fire escape and be in the room behind the bedroom. So they said, we'd like you to go up there and see if you can get a hole in the wall and get a fiber optic in there to see his environment and get a better look at him. He's not being too responsive. We're trying to negotiate with him. We take the roof hatch off the top of the roof where the staircase is, and we put a ballistic blanket on the top of the roof. He's shooting all day, out through the walls, up the stairs, out the windows and whatnot. We have a sniper up, but we don't want to take. We want to try and talk them out.
Right.
So the negotiator's up on the top of the stairs. I get up to the back room. It's just a sheetrock wall. I put a blanket up on the wall, a Kevlar blanket. It's a 3A, means that it stops pistol rounds. He's got a 45 semi-auto, and he's standing maybe a foot and a half from me, facing me with the gun facing me through the wall, but I can't see him. And he's talking to the negotiator, and luckily I put the blanket up. I almost wasn't. I had to be reminded, hey, this guy's shooting all the time. Why don't you bring your blanket up? So I put the blanket up. I start silently making a little hole in the wall to get the fiber optic through so we get eyeball on him. And bam, he lets a shot go. It's 45. It comes through the sheetrock, just a couple of layers of thin sheetrock, and hits me in the lower abdomen, but gets stopped in the Kevlar. So I basically got saved by the Kevlar. And I'm laughing again. The bullet, 45 is a big, slow bullet,
right?
And it hurt. It hit me good, and it hurt. It hit me under the vest, and probably would have taken out my whole lower abdomen, and God knows what it would have done. But there it was. It kind of bounced off the blanket, and there it was laying on the floor. I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and went back to work. So I mean, it hurt a little bit, but we had a mission to do. And next thing you know, we start putting chemical agents in there. We start putting tear gas in there, and after a few more hours, he does surrender. But the interesting thing about it was, and I'm sure you hear this story all over police work, that he was less bothered by the tear gas than us.
Yeah.
We were all coughing and hacking, and he was like, no
I'm
problem.
not laughing at you, Al. We had an old saying. Remember back in the Mace days?
Oh, yeah.
We used to have a saying that stuff only worked on innocent bystanders and police. It never worked on the bad guys.
It never works on a bad guy,
Never worked on the bad guys ever. And we yelled at, whatever you do, don't spray that stuff.
Oh, that's so true, I mean, and the wind knows exactly, how to blow it back in your face,
It's like the old camping stories. No matter where I am, the camp smoke from the fire is going to follow me. It does not matter.
Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear it wasn't just me. But here's one thing.
No.
You had a couple of really close calls, and I'm sure you had many over your career.
Oh yes.
Every now and then, I get to thinking, I was in 4 shootings in a little more than 10 years. And back then, like you, we just called them shootings. There were no officer involved. It was just a shooting. And I lost count of all the other close calls and shots fired and all that stuff. But they were never like they're portrayed in the media. But I thought to myself, Alan, I got to ask you this. Do you ever think, how did I manage to survive when so many other great cops didn't?
And I was known for that because I'd get back to quarters and the guy'd say, "Not you again." That's how many narrow cases I had. I had a guy throw a hand grenade. Guy killed a cop. He was barricaded. We went in. I shot him. Didn't kill him, and he threw a grenade at us and had a stovepipe in his 45 Thompson replica, and it didn't get any closer than that. He would have killed us all with that if that grenade went off. So I can't tell you. I mean, I must have survived 12, 14 more, a dozen or more cases that only for the grace of God, bullets going past my head, so. I
don't have the answers, and I wish I did. To be honest with you, I'm glad I don't, because there's no logic to this. And one of the things I hear people say, by the grace of God, and you said it, which is fine. But it's like, well, a lot of these other guys that were real, I say guys, that's men and women, they're great cops. They did everything great. They were better than me in many ways. They were more faithful, and they didn't make it.
Yeah. Well, I always say, God's been better to me than I've been to him. I mean, I'm not a bad guy. I try to live my life upstanding and God fearing as a Christian and whatnot. But if you put the God factor in there, my goodness, it had to be. I mean,
and by the way, I sometimes fall far short of the measure of comparison when it comes to people who really, really great people. But I'm a much better guy than I used to be. We're talking about Al Baker. He He is retired NYPD police lieutenant, spent much of his career in ESU. When we return, we're going to talk briefly about a story where his unit had to shoot some polar bears in New York City and the heat and blowback they took. This is a Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You can find us on Facebook. Look for and like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. LETradio.com is our home on the World Wide Web, the internet. You can find all of our content, including past episodes of the radio show, as a free podcast, plus special podcast episodes that were never aired on radio, unique blogs, and much more. Don't forget to sign up for our free email newsletter and much more at letradio.com. That is letradio.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Returning a conversation with Al Baker, retired NYPD police lieutenant, spent much of his career in the famed ESU, Emergency Services Unit. Check out his website, bakerballistics.com. That's BAKER ballistics.com, which we will talk about in a moment. When I got introduced to Al, someone told me a very quick headline. He shot and killed 2 polar bears. Well, that's not quite true, but you think polar bears in New York City, how's that even a possibility?
Well, so what happens, it's Prospect Park, it's late spring, and it's late evening. The zoo in Prospect Park is now closed. So 3 young men, 12 and 13, break into the park for the purpose of gathering the coins that people throw into the various animal reflecting pools and waiting pools in the cages. So they're going through to collect the money and, go buy some ice cream or whatever kids that age do, who knows what else. And they get to the polar bear cage. So the little ringleader guy kind of says to the other 2 kids, let's go into the polo bears. He called them polo bears as opposed to polar bears. And not, of course, realizing that the polar bear is probably the most voracious carnivore on the planet.
Yeah.
So he intimidates the other 2 of his friends. Take off your clothes. We're going in the pool, and he makes them take off their clothes, and he throws the clothes over the fence into the polar bear cage. Now, a polar bear fence is designed to keep the polar bears in, not the people out. So it's far easier to get into the cage than it is to get out because it's got the reverse spikes. So anyway, he starts over into the cage and forcing them to go up. He gets into the polar bear cage, and they chicken out, and they drop down into the street, and he drops down into the cage. So the 2 polar bears are Teddy and Lucy. Teddy is the male, he's 1,200 pounds, and Lucy is the female, she's 900 pounds. And he gets the hose and he starts tantalizing the polar bears with the hose, and the garden hose or whatever, the water hose. And the 2 kids, they get scared and they start running down Flatbush Avenue scared to the wits. So people see 2 kids running down the middle of Flatbush Avenue in their underwear. They call 911.
Right.
Cops come, and by this time, the bear has the boy under control. So it gets graphic here.
Yeah, we'll leave that part alone.
We'll leave that part alone.
You and your crew, you were forced into this situation because of, I'll say this, I say it all the time, if it wasn't for the behavior of humans, you never would have been there.
Well, true. I mean, and God knows these polar bears amused families and kids, God knows how long. We love them. They're beautiful animals. They're God's creatures. But, and when the animal rights people came after me, they said, why are you killing those bears? Why couldn't you have done this, that, or the other thing? Of course, they don't know that there's an immediate life in danger, and the polar bear is in the process of devouring devouring a human being. So now we, the police, have to make a decision between animal life and human life, and I think that's a fairly easy decision to make.
Right, it is.
So that was the decision that was made, and there was a number of officers that had to fire at these bears. Now, incidentally, since there were 3 sets of clothing in the pool, and the officers on scene didn't know about the other 2 kids, they assumed it's a big cage, and there were 2 bears, and there were plenty of hiding places and nooks and crannies in there. So the assumption was that there were 3 human kids in there in peril. So both polar bears had to be shot, and believe me, it took quite a number of rounds to take those polar bears down.
One of the things that we would get quite often, I'm sure you know the answer to this, and when I try to tell people the answer, they don't like it. Well, why didn't you use an animal tranquilizer gun? Then I'm thinking, well, the answer is the dosage that we carry would be enough to kill almost anything.
Well, that's true, and not only that, but the animal control system that we were afforded was not intended for big game. I mean, you have to; those darts have to be loaded with a specific amount of fluid, of tranquilizer. It has to be a certain size dart.
Right.
It has to propel a certain way. Now, putting a dart into a dog, for example, is relatively simple, but getting the right size dart with the right size tip to inject into a polar bear is quite a different situation. I mean, that's a 1,200-pound animal. I mean, the first bullets that you fired at these bears didn't even affect them. I mean, they were unmoved by even bullets in the beginning.
That was a no-win situation for you and your crew.
Yeah, I mean, you had a tough decision to make, and that's what police work is all about. It's about making a split-second decision that no matter how hard you try to explain it, you're not going to find any understanding in the outside world, because the average person doesn't have a clue of what it's like to make a life-and-death decision in seconds.
And I'm sure you took a lot of blowback in the media and from activist groups, didn't you?
Oh, I still to this day have a packet of hate mail in my folder in the case folder that I keep for that case, and they were very antagonistic toward me personally, wishing me all kinds of death and illness and whatnot for being such a hateful person as to kill these innocent bears. So I mean, but hey, that goes with the territory. I mean, obviously. The real interesting thing about human nature is you'll get infinitely more criticism for killing an animal than you will for killing a human.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I'm glad I didn't have to do either in my career. And trust me, there was lots of violence. I want to switch gears. You retired. You said earlier in the conversation you stayed involved in training. You're really involved in ballistic shields. Tell us about that.
So I cut my teeth on shields in ESU because obviously myself and my team, I mean, dozens of us wouldn't be walking around if it had not been for ballistic shields. So I developed a keen sense of awareness for shields, and when I came to retirement time, I was approached by an armor company that said, we'd like to hire you to be our shield expert, an armor expert. So I said, okay, and I hung it up and I went to work, and I went around the country training, I guess about 500 tactical teams throughout the United States and internationally on a ballistic shield training course that I developed. And during the course of that training, and anybody in law enforcement who knows anything about training will tell you, you learn more by training than you do teach.
Right.
You learn more from the cops than you give. So I developed the idea after 10 years of doing shield training, 500 agencies over the course, I developed a product called the Bat Shield, the Baker Bat Shield, which is on the website. And it's a folding shield. It's a pistol threat shield. And what it does is it allows a single operator to deploy with a shield and a rifle together with one shield. It's a lightweight shield, and it flexes like bat wings. And instead of having two people in a stack where the rifle, the major firepower, is behind the shield, now you have a single operator with a rifle, which is faster. You're not depending upon step and drag. You're depending more on rapid deployment. And in the day of active shooter, where time is of the essence, the studies say every 15 seconds another death, so you got to get in there quick and stop the killing. So this system was developed for a ballistic shield and a rifle working together for rapid deployment.
And where can people get more information about that? Because I'll be honest with you, that sounds fascinating.
It's fascinating, and it's a tremendous thing, and especially in this day and age. I mean, we talk about kids, and we look at Uvalde and some of these other terrible cases, and my goodness, we have to be better prepared. But my website has a complete information. Now, the Bat Shield has given way to the MRAPs, which is a rifle threat shield, because now today we see a growing incidence of shooters using rifles.
Right.
So now the shield has to stop the rifle. So now the question becomes, well, the rifle is bigger, it's heavier, it's thicker, it's good 5 times as much money. So you're really stepping up to the big leagues when you have to bring a rifle on a rapid deployment.
And we got to cut you off. Get all the details at his website. That is bakerballistics.com. Al, thanks so much for your service, and thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated.
My honor and pleasure. Thank you, sir.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or 2 or 3. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.